Welcome to What is Food for You? This is our podcast. My name is Daniel Russek. I'm the founder and CEO of Atarraya. And this podcast is an experiment in having conversations about food from different perspectives, technology, culture, the culinary aspect of it. It's going to be fun. And this first episode, it's with James Sibley. James is a very interesting character. He's a mix between a very successful influencer, a geneticist, but also an aquaculture enthusiast. We met a couple of years ago because one of his videos about our technology exploded and had like over 10 million views. So that was interesting. And we became friends, and he's the perfect first guest for this conversation. So I hope you enjoy it, and thank you for listening. Hi, James. How are you?
I'm doing well, Daniel. Doing well here in Boston. How are you?
Very well. I'm here in Puerto Escondido, Oaxaca. You haven't been here, right?
I have not. No, I haven't been to Mexico since 2017, and that was the other side.
Nice. 2017. How old were you?
17. That was in high school.
Okay, so you were one of those rare people in the world that can really calculate their life, how old they are.
Only for 3 months of the year. I'm a 1999 kid.
Interesting. Do you think that helped in terms of your brain development to need to struggle with that specific mathematical challenge?
Well, I mean, now that I'm 24, I still struggle with it. So yes. I'm going to say no.
You know this Outliers book from Malcolm Gladwell that tries to track different kinds of like special things that can happen to your life that can give you like a surprise advantage, no? Like being like the kids that are born in the like the first months of the year, or no, the second half of the year, they tend to be like older when they get into sports. They have an advantage, right? So then they have like more time and more like central positions in teams, so they develop much better, and they have like an unfair advantage once they reach college, right? Have you ever heard about that argument?
So I haven't. I don't know the book specifically, but you know, I was one of those kids.
Oh, interesting.
Especially once I got into college, I did a 5-year program for my undergrad, and by that last year, I got so much more out of my 5th year in college after doing 2 years in internships and everything that I look back and I wish I'd kept going, or I'd taken a longer gap, right? All of this. So there's definitely something to that, you know, where, especially with guys here, I feel like the development's a bit slower. So if we put the brakes on a little and kind of come into things maybe a year or two later, it could benefit all of us.
Interesting, because the other argument is really about getting there first, and you're saying getting there last might be kind of like an advantage, right? You have more time to mature before you need to actually take on a challenge.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. I look back at when I was 17. I didn't go to college till I was 19. Those 2 years, I'm glad I wasn't in college. Let's just put it that way, right? You know, it's for me specifically, I guess it's just, you know, I wouldn't say getting there late or last, but not being first is definitely a good thing sometimes.
Interesting. And you just graduated?
I did, yes, just this past August.
And all that while being like a superstar TikToker for the aquaculture industry?
Well, you know, that was the second half of university. The first half, I wasn't even on social media. I'd send memes to my friends. But once the lockdown hits with COVID, you know, that's where things ended up. And we can dive into that as we talk here a bit. But yeah, that was definitely a unique part to my college time, was balancing coursework with making TikToks, and those two do not align well. Let me tell you, my professors thought I was off dancing, and people in industry, when they realized I was, you know, calling them from the university library, they'd hang up pretty quick. So I kind of had to do both without them knowing that the other was there.
Yeah, that's interesting. So because I know your channel because of the videos that you very nicely did about our work and our shrimp, and that very interesting moment when you like shot a video of the Shrimpbox. So So tell me a little bit about that day. Like how was it? Because on our end, I just arrived to the booth, and then someone said, "Oh, there was a TikToker here," and I said, "Like, oh, interesting." And so then maybe he will come back, and maybe you can have a conversation or blah blah blah. And I don't know if this is after they noticed the impact of your first video. Did you release it during the show? That video?
Yeah,
The
so to set the scene a bit, right? This was the Seafood Expo in Boston, and you, with Shrimpbox, amongst 1,000 others, had set up there. But what you guys brought that others didn't was a shipping container full of shrimp, right? So that drew me and pretty much everybody else in the expo over at some points to see what was going on. Like what was that about? I'd never heard of it or seen it, so that was crazy to me. So that's what drew me over in the first place, because I went to this expo. I got a student discount. It was great, $60 for 3 days.
Yes.
So I wandered around aimlessly. I'd never been to an expo, let alone, I mean, SENA turns out to be one of the biggest ones in the States for seafood. So quite a shock there from nothing to that. And I didn't really know what I was doing. So I went because I was interested in the seafood industry. I was finishing up my time in college. That was my last year. So I kind of wanted to get a feel for, who is in this industry? Where can I start to look for, I don't know, positions, contract work, anything like that? Because, I was still starting out with my TikToks and a more professional stance, because for the first year or so of doing them, I was really just I still do it for fun. Don't get me wrong, but it was really just for fun. To the point where I'd go record something during my internship, working in seafood, and then I'd go voice it over in the car. So if you listen carefully, you can hear guys arguing in the background, and my car engine's on. Sometimes I'm like eating food. Well, those were not professional. Things have improved since then, obviously, and I ran across Shrimpbox at SENA right at that transition, right when I was starting to actually edit videos properly. I was spending time on this and actually, diving into YouTube tutorials on how to do that. So when I came across you guys on the first day of SENA, I looked inside the container, and there's a bunch of shrimp swimming around. I'd never seen shrimp swimming before in my life, besides the very, very tiny ones that you put in fish tanks, cherry shrimps. So that was a shock to me. I did not expect to see that in Boston. And I just recorded them swimming around and did put out a quick 10-second video. That 10-second video to date is still my most engaged video ever. I had
interesting. Over
1.5 million likes, comments, shares altogether. That engagement, 1.5 million people. I think 10 or 11 million people watched it, and that's a really high engagement rate for shrimp swimming around.
Yes. Yes.
I had all sorts of people reaching out about that, and I showed up to SENA the next day, because that was day one when I did that. And by then it had only been up for 24 hours, but it got millions and millions of views. You guys, some people on your team saw it.
Yes.
So I showed back up at your booth, and I'm like, hey, so I made a really quick TikTok yesterday, and people are interested. Do you mind if I do this right? Right? Because that was just like a quick, I wasn't diving into what Shrimpbox was about, why you're doing it, what it's bringing to the, I didn't do any of that. And I really wanted to, because that was everybody's question. Besides like how cute these shrimp are swimming around.
Yes.
So, and that was really, doing a real video on you guys, right? I ended up putting together a highly edited 3-minute, right, dive into everything I could pack into that time, what the Shrimpbox is, where it started, what makes it unique, why this is a sustainable solution, right? And again, people loved it, right? It's not often you run across short form video that has really high engagement if it's long, right? When you're scrolling on Instagram, right? How often do you sit down and watch a 3-minute video?
No,
not often.
Yeah,
but that still got it was 1.5 million views again, right? Wow. With such long content, right? That video was watched for months and months and months in total, potentially even a year, and that was really incredible. People loved your vision, right? It wasn't just how Shrimpbox is like a really unique idea. It was how you were presenting it, right? It's how you're executing on it. It's not just build a new unique farm. It's do it in a way that is realistic and feasible, because people can look at a shipping container and see, right? The connection is right there. You could put this anywhere, right? This isn't limited to where they're going to have shrimp ponds, right? This is, and that's what I thought was so incredible when I first saw it, and that's what it seems everybody else does too. So there's a long-winded answer of that first video with you guys.
So it's interesting, Sina, because the idea of Shrimpbox basically, which I think it's a pretty simple idea. I mean, it's not like very complicated, but so Sina has been very instrumental and impactful in my life, in my professional life, also in my personal life. And it's interesting because Sina is boring, is very, very boring. But at the same time, things happen, like very subtle things happened. This is where I met Joshua, and this is how we got to sell to Jose Andres, right? This is also how basically Shrimpbox idea came about. So this was 2019. I was at Sina there. And then there was some very interesting guy, very funny, with a very dark humor. And he seemed very smart. And he is Chinese American. And so my whole thing all the time in Boston has been always eating raw shrimp all day, right? So people come. So when we had a very small booth, I would basically be on the aisle, like in the aisle, and just be eating raw shrimp. And then people would say, like, are you eating raw shrimp? And I said, yes, I've been eating it the whole day. This is basically the only shrimp that I would ever eat raw. So we would meet people. So this guy, being Asian, Chinese, or Chinese Asian? Chinese American. So Chinese American, sorry. He knows about raw food. He can really appreciate raw food. Like, I didn't eat raw food until I was like 15 years old or something like that. So this guy really knows, and he knows a lot about food, and he really likes the shrimp. And he tells me, so I'm gonna do like this tasting. I will have an organic shrimp from India against your shrimp. So would you give me some samples? And I said, okay, wait until the show ends, and I'll give you a bucket. So I gave him a bucket. He ends up inviting me to basically try this with Andrea. And then then he says, okay, yeah, this is great. This is the best shrimp. Okay, I can tell you that this is the best shrimp on Sina, like for sure. Like, there is no question. And it's probably the best shrimp I've eaten out of China. So I need this live. I have a couple of restaurants, and I just want to eat live shrimp here in Boston. And I said, can't be done. Because many other people have also told me about this, right? Brought me this idea. And I would just go straight saying, oh no, that's stupid. It cannot be done. Why? Because of labor. Why? Because shrimp like warm water. So they need, so then you need more energy. Then paying $20 an hour for an employee when in Ecuador they pay, I don't know, like $2. You cannot compete ever. So, but this guy, it turns out, he was literally a space scientist. He was basically a professor at MIT, and he had I don't know if it was Harvard or MIT at the time, but so he literally had in his living room an experiment, so some machine that was connected to something that was connected to the International Space Station, and he was getting data there. So this guy was a very smart guy. And so when I told him about, because of heat, and said like, yeah, how much heat? How many calories? Like what? And he starts to do some kinds of like, I don't know, like, at least he was arguing with me. Because before, everybody would just say like, okay, I guess this guy thought this up, right? And I kind of had not, really. I just dismissed the idea. And then we started talking about it, and at the end of the day, this was, so So basically, the idea was a shipping container, because that simplifies the construction time, mostly because of that, right? So then, I don't know, is this light fine? I think it is, no?
I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So the where was I? So yes. So my point with this guy is that we had this conversation. It was okay, a shipping container, and that was a solution to many of these issues. To the issue of labor, if you automate it, to the issue of construction time and construction costs. So it's very easy to deploy. It's very fast. And I thought I was ashamed of that idea. So I came back to Mexico. I basically told the team, I think this is stupid, but I don't know why. I'm going to tell you the stupidest idea. It sounds ridiculous. Tell me why is it wrong? What's wrong with it, because I cannot find it. Like, I cannot find something that is terminally wrong. And they actually received it very well. They said, maybe it's not stupid. Maybe it's a good idea. Let me think about it, right? And yeah, that was, and for a while, even when we were sure that this was a good idea, I was kind of ashamed to say this to, for instance, investors, right? Because are you crazy? We have been investing a lot of time and resources on your farm, like in Oaxaca, and now you want to take the business to the United States. So, but then COVID hit, and we knew that we were not going to be able to export from here. So, then it was like, this is the only thing that can save us, really, this crazy idea. So we built our first one. It kind of worked. Then we started working on this, and now we are here, right? So today we actually signed our first, we actually got the first deposit for our first sale for a Shrimpbox farm. It's gonna
Really?
Yes.
Oh, you're going to have these first third-party farms going.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
That's such a difficult hurdle, right? Especially because you're not just selling CPGs, you're selling a whole farm system, right?
Yes.
That's hard. So, once you break that ice, where's the limit?
We hope so. Like we are really happy. It's been difficult 6 months because when we decided to, okay, let's sell this thing, we're ready. And that was it was a harder time than I anticipated. Just the feeling of that, like, we're ready. Are we? Are you sure? I don't know. So maybe like at some point, I think that I was not feeling that I was pressing as hard. Like am I kind of it's like having second thoughts about having second thoughts, right? How neurotic can this be? Because, but today we got our first sale. So yeah, so we need to celebrate a little bit. So yes.
Yeah.
So like, and probably, like, I wouldn't be surprised if one of these guys actually saw your video. I don't know because your video comes up a lot. There's a lot of people.
Really?
Yes.
Does it still 6 months out?
Yes. And I don't know I'm sure you know, what are the interactions between Google search and TikTok. I don't know how often you get traffic from Google. Do you?
So if you look up my name, the first thing you find is a comedian from the UK. But everything else is TikTok.
Nice.
For me.
Okay.
Which is a blessing and a curse, because that's great, right? Google search is really well integrated with TikTok. And that's one of the reasons TikTok is so big. They're really good with SEO. It outperforms. I have my own website under my own name.
Yeah.
I'm trying really hard to push people there, but they always come right back to TikTok.
Mm-hmm.
Google search and TikTok, they're very well integrated.
So of course, somebody has seen our video on your channel. So sometimes, my point is that those two things like happen in Sina, right? Which, I don't know, for me, like time warp, I don't even know ever know what's really going around, because it's like just 3 days of like you cannot really put your mind onto like talking to so many people. It's interesting.
Oh, it's crazy.
It's interesting. It's like a warp of time. Like I'm not complaining because it kind of gives me energy, but not. It's weird. So yeah. So how do you think? I don't know, because this conversation can go so many ways, right? Like you're okay. So first, tell me about your involvement with aquaculture, because you're. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You just finished your college, like undergrad, I think.
Yeah. So I just finished up my undergrad back in August, as I said, and I studied biology, genetic biology. So
Yes.
it's a very technical degree there, and I love it. I love that stuff. It's the crossover with aquaculture is almost non-existent in that study at the university I was at. Right. So I was at Northeastern in Boston. It's a really strong engineering and STEM school, but our marine biology is disconnected from that. We have a marine biology program. It's at a satellite campus. It's not even in Boston. So I didn't have an opportunity to do anything in that field. I played around with some of the axolotls in the axolotl lab. If you want to call that aquaculture, I would venture to say maybe. Right, we had 600 axolotls swimming around in a lab. That was a lot of fun. They're great genetic studying organisms. They have the unique ability with stem cells there. But anyways, I digress. So
No. Let's talk about the ajolotes. We can do like a specific pause because of course
sure.
they're from my city. These are my buddies. I mean, they are.
Are they really?
Yes, they're. I think yes, ajolote. So we call it through ajolote. It's like this kind of smiley face amphibian, right? You're talking about these guys? Yeah, so they are originals from Xochimilco in Mexico City. You know about this or not?
I know that they're from Mexico. I didn't know where, and I don't know much about them in the wild. I studied them only in lab settings. But I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is Mexico City. I won't say nothing good about Mexico City because then everybody wants to go and live there. We're getting sick of that. But my point. So Mexico City has a very interesting natural environment, right? So on the south of Mexico City, there is this. I think it's one of the most like complex and long networks of channels of freshwater channels, right? And it's like I don't know, hundreds or probably thousands of miles of channels, like inside Mexico City. And the Aztecs a while ago decided to basically use that. So there's like a very rich soil around this area. So they basically built small islands for agriculture, and this is actually really good digress because it's basically a multi-trophic system. So it's not monoculture. It's called the milpa, and it has, I'm gonna mess this up, but it's got beans, it's got maize, corn. It has calabaza, which I don't know, zucchini. There must be another word for that. And the fourth one was, I think that it was changing. But my point is that this was the basis of the Aztec diet, right? And it was very efficient on a per hectare basis. It was feeding, I think it was probably around 1 million people in Mexico City being fed on this technology, right? And multi-production system. So I don't know how nourished were they or something like that, but precisely so from that channel, of that network channel, it's where the ajolote comes from. It is endemic to that channel area. So yes, and I don't think there's a lot of them in the wild anymore, but I
believe there's 1,400 in the wild.
Wow.
An estimate.
Yeah, across hundreds of miles. So yes, so then the this is why it's very interesting. So that's from like a anthropological perspective why this is interesting for us. And of course they are cute as hell. I mean, they are really, really, really cute, right? But I don't know them as an organism. I don't know them like I know shrimp. So please tell us about ajolotes.
Oh no, they're fascinating. So I took a course at my university, my last semester, on stem cells and regeneration. And my professor who taught it, obviously he's like the stem cell guy. He loves this stuff. And as it turns out, there aren't a lot of great model organisms for stem cells. Using human stem cells is extremely expensive and controversial.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use things like frogs are actually a great example. But axolotls are unique because, simply put, they are evolutionarily stunted, right? So they're amphibious, yes, at points, but they're mostly aquatic. And that's unique for salamanders because like normal amphibious organisms like that undergo metamorphosis. They come out of the water eventually, like newts and regular, I shouldn't say regular, but the salamanders we have up here in the States, right? They all start out in the water like frogs, and then they eventually come out. Axolotls never come out. And that has left them in this genetic state of metamorphosis. So they approach the change, but they never really go past it, which has left, and what that leaves them with is they have a really weak immune system, and all of this stuff that we encounter with what you would consider like grown-up bodies, like we've kind of reached the end of our metamorphosis as really any other being, is our bodies don't expect a lot of change, right? If we lose an arm, that's gone. There's no system to bring that back. With axolotls, it's different because their body still kind of thinks that there's metamorphosis to come. So there's all of these stem cells throughout their body that are prepared for that because, their ancestors would have undergone a change that they never will because they got stuck in these caves down in Mexico, right? So the genetic component is there, but it doesn't happen. So they're primed and ready, which is why they're an incredible organism. They're vertebrates that can regrow entire limbs, their tails. And what's even crazier with them is if you take, let's say, they're called blastomas, where you take like a little, it's kind of morbid here, but you amputate a limb, right? And you put that on another axolotl.
Wow.
It'll grow back there.
What?
Functionally, right? It'll rewire their nervous system as well, and everything will work.
What the?
So these organisms are really just, there's just a wealth of knowledge there to understand.
Wow.
What are the chemical signals that play into this, right?
Shit.
And there's all sorts of, like retinol is actually a chemical that we have and is prescribed actually. It's, but it just so happens to, you expose axolotls to it and it totally messes up their growth patterns, and you end up with arms that have like 4 elbows. They just keep going and going and going.
Oh shit.
So yeah, no, axolotls are incredible, right? And my professor, he's really into them. So he has a huge lab where he breeds them, and he uses genetic editing tools like CRISPR, as well as more classical transgenic and retroviral gene editing techniques. And he examines how this happens. Like what are the pathways here? Because they're vertebrates just like us. There's a lot of similarities there, genetically speaking, right? Most of the drugs that we use as humans, they've been tested on rats. That's where you start, rats and mice. Axolotls, they're not too much further off than rats are from us, right? It's
closer than
it's still
bananas.
a stretch, but if we can, so like the whole concept is like if we can understand how axolotls regenerate the way they do, they don't face the same issues we do, right? If scarring, not a thing. All of these degenerative disorders that we face, not a thing. They can regrow parts of their brain, recover from brain damage, right? So the possibilities that come with studying axolotls are limitless. We just don't know yet. They're new to the scientific world as an organism for study.
Yes. This is fascinating.
It's you got to look it up. I'm going to send you links after.
Yes, please. I think I want to go over that rabbit hole. So, do they age?
They do. Yes. So they have a biological clock as most organisms do. Not all, but yes. So they do. They get old. They will die at some point.
Do they get cancer?
So that was definitely something that we studied, and a lot of the older methods for studying stem cells, right, was to take animals and irradiate them, right? You just, it's kind of old school studying stem cells, embryology, all this. It's pretty morbid, but yeah, you irradiate them. And axolotls have a unique ability to fight cancer and not even get it in the first place. They have much stronger intracellular systems against it. Those cells will, it's called apoptosis. They'll just die on their own, right? They have a very strong system for that. And it's just, I mean, with a lot of these, they're fast living organisms, right? So cancer isn't like as big a concern for them as it is for us, but still, that's a totally viable route that they're looking at there.
Wow. I never, I never heard anything about this really. So, okay, so we just finished that digress on ajolotes. So then, what was your connection with aquaculture? So,
yeah, of course, yeah. So those were the kind of things I was studying at school, right? It was adjacent to aquaculture in the more traditional sense of the word, but I wasn't actively out on the fish farms taking data, right? Like a lot of people are who study aquaculture. It's not big in the States, but if you go to Canada or Norway or New Zealand, Australia, you can get a bachelor's in aquaculture. That's a thing, not where I was. And, I was still developing my passion for seafood. So outside of axolotls and my study in genetics, I was working at a local Boston fish distributor, right? So my university, we did a semester of classes and then a semester of internships, and you alternate back and forth. That's why that was one of the selling points of my school, and I really appreciated it because I graduated with at least 2 years of industry experience under my belt. And what that did was one of my internships was in seafood. And the way that came about was, a lot of stuff played into that. But mainly when I was in high school and even before then, right? I'm from a small farm town outside of Boston. I'm not from downtown Boston. So my options were to go into the city and work, which was quite the drive, or take the train, right? I couldn't even drive some of those early points, or work the farms, right? So I ended up working a lot of summers in the farms. And I loved that work. It's hands-on, it's brutal. If anyone out there has ever staked tomatoes, I pray for you. So, but at the end of the day, you literally see the fruits of your labor. And I really liked that kind of, physical work. And the whole time when I'm out in the farm, right, I was like listening to podcasts and trying to keep my brain entertained as well. Because, in the end of the day, I like to question everything. I ended up studying science, and that's why I really wondered what was going on with everything. So it all came back to the farm is really where it all started. That's where my love of biology came from, kind of the world around me, because I worked on an organic farm. It wasn't just, a big monocrop. We had everything. I ended up working the melon fields a lot, which we would rotate out for lettuce and corn and tomatoes. We did a lot of tomatoes, heirlooms and plum tomatoes, everything, right? So we had all sorts of stuff going on, and it was a lot of fun, right? It was crazy trying to fight off all these animals and bugs and stuff without using any pet. The only thing we put on our plants was copper every once in a while on our tomatoes, and that was it. So I would be out in the morning squashing onion beetles because we're not spraying them, so something's got to be done. So I kind of developed an appreciation for doing things a bit different when it comes to food production there, not just flying over with a crop duster and calling it a day.
Sorry.
Yeah. And then, so the jump to seafood was COVID. When that struck, school was done for me, right? I had a year and a half off of school there. They sent, because I was in downtown Boston. There's nowhere worse to be for college if you're going to be in a pandemic. So they sent us all home. And I couldn't work the farms in the winter when the pandemic hit. So the next best thing for me was, well, if I can't work in fruits and veggies, I guess I'll go into meat. And I didn't have much experience there. My parents didn't work on docks like a lot of people in aquaculture. But it was available and I was interested. I've always loved fish. I've always loved the ocean and just seafood in general. It's, when my parents were willing to buy it, I loved it growing up. But I didn't know anything about it. I really didn't. Besides aquaculture, I knew it was a thing. I knew that some stuff was farmed. I didn't know how that worked or why or any of the complexities that play into this incredible global fragmented system we have now. But I just started out small as a fishmonger, just working the counter in retail and kind of getting a feel of things. And that's when I really fell down the rabbit hole. Absolutely. When you're working with fish all the time and you're out there like tabbing oysters and you're deveining shrimp, and you kind of just eventually, when you get used to the physical nature of it all and the unique vernacular of a lot of the people you work with, the seafood industry has got a lot of swearing in it. When you get used to all that, you really just kind of fall in love with it. And that was kind of the jump there for me. I really decided, okay, I love food. I grew up in food, and I study biology for humans, but what I'm really interested in here is the biology of the world that makes us human, right? The food production, the unique kinds of food production that kind of bring us where we are. And aquaculture to me is like that. It's the pinnacle of that.
Why? Why do you think it's the pinnacle?
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
It's, there's all those the buzz sentences out there, I'll call it, right? It's like, we need to feed 10 billion people by the year 2050. How are we going to do that with, beef and pork and all these? We're not. So aquaculture is the answer. And I agree. Absolutely. We got a big ocean out there and we're not utilizing it to our fullest extent for that. But there's so much more than that. You can't just take a fish farm and drag it offshore and say, hey, look, I'm farming fish in a new place, add it to the list. No, that's not going to work. There's a reason like the only offshore farm is like this massive pilot facility, and they're having issues. That's hard.
Which one?
So
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about I believe it's the Salmar Ocean Farm 1. They have a massive salmonid test farm. It's an offshore facility that they've been working on for a few years. It's I don't know what like the full scale is, but they brought in some oil rig manufacturer people to help them build out this. If you look up pictures, you can see this test.
Please explain what is an offshore farm. What would that entail?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So from what I've learned in my past few years here, getting into aquaculture, right? It's inshore farms. That's where most of our finfish comes from. They're right by shore, right? They're typically in fjords. It's just, fjords have a lot of good water flow in and out. They're protected from the storms that you face out in the open waters and a lot of like the larger predators. And they're really easy to access, right? You can just get a boat in from the shore. It's a piece of cake. So fjords are perfect for like inshore aquaculture. And inshore just means anywhere really close to shore, protected from the open ocean. So offshore aquaculture is the opposite, right? It's how do you farm fish or anything in the open ocean, right? You got massive waves, you got huge currents. Your oxygen levels are variable, to say the least. It's hard. It's really hard to do anything out there. You need massive equipment. That's why these oil rigs that are out there are these enormous structures, because they need to be able to survive in those environments. It's really difficult. So there aren't any commercial offshore aquaculture facilities that are up and running, commercially viable and safe for the environment.
Yes.
It hasn't been done yet.
And inland, it's basically the same. There are no, at least for like how many inland that is not like right on the shore, Do you know any success story there?
So on land-based facilities? Yeah. So as far as fish go, I mean, this is arguable for sure, but not really. Not to the scale that would even make a drop in what open ocean, or not open ocean, but inshore ocean net pens can do. Can't possibly compete with that with some of these RAS facilities or any other, even if it's not recirculating aquaculture, even some of those other inland facilities, they don't match up. It's really hard to do that stuff from what I've seen. But you guys have gone and shown me that you were my first introduction to shrimp farms. I've since seen some more traditional ones, especially in Vietnam. And what you're doing is the most successful inland farming I've ever seen.
How
I've
could you
seen some other
describe the
stuff with
traditional
fish.
one?
Yeah, the traditional. So, for instance, in Vietnam, right? I was driving out to up north, out to Ha Long Bay. I was coming from Hanoi, and there's just an endless. You're going down the straight road, surrounded by what looks like marshlands, but what really
Yes.
is just sprawling pearl farms and shrimp farms. So it was really like the scale of it to me was crazy, because it miles and miles and miles. It was just farms in these bays, and every direction, 360 degrees. Been like there's got the highway in the middle, and it's just farms. Um, Now, it was very peaceful. Honestly, that was something that I didn't expect. I've read a lot about the ups and the downs of traditional shrimp farms in that manner, those style of farms. But I read a lot of bad stuff about it, and seeing it there in person really just kind of brings it into perspective as to, I get that this is a fight from both sides, and that like the answer isn't just stop. The answer has to be more creative than that.
Yes, I mean the amount of food that these facilities produce is a lot. We really need it. No, we cannot just get crazy and say like just stop doing this. So it's like I think that we need to figure out a transition. Like of course, like our technology, if it is successful, it could probably make a dent of 10% in some markets, right? Like for the next 10 years or I don't know how long it would take to do something bigger because there is a huge infrastructure that's there. But at the same time, these places rely on cheap land and cheap labor. And land is not going to get any cheaper and labor is not going to get any cheaper. So this is why they are always moving from, so the leadership of these industries are always moving from one country to the other, right? Because, this country that used to export a lot of shrimp, it's now basically eating more and more and more shrimp. So they have less and less supply to deliver to the global market. So, and this industry that now relies on you produce over there and I eat it over here, and it needs to travel I don't know how many thousand miles in order for me to get it, and in the process is so opaque that I don't know where was this grown and if they used or how much antibiotics they used. So there is no responsibility, no accountability, right? And this is something that, like in our case, we know that there's a market, there's people that care about these issues, right? And right now they are not being served. And this is basically, we think that what we're doing is creating like one example of how a different food system can look like, right? Because I don't know what, I was the first time I heard about, I think it was Memphis meats, the first lab grown meat that I've ever heard about, and I really got excited, and I started actually to bully a little bit my friend that at the time was the manager of a very big cattle ranch, that these guys are going to leave you without a job, right? So, but. And then the more and more I thought about it, I started to think that this is really sad. To think that it's not about the focusing on the animal or no animal and the suffering and all that, which I get it. But the problem is that the actual product, it's not really meat and that's it, right? So it's some cells and then there's a lot of chemicals and texturizers and flavors and colors and fetal bovine serum. Like this is not exactly what, and then so it's basically eating more. It's basically eating a goo produced by a company, right? Somewhere with some patent and some secret sauce that now we need to ingest and then live off of that. I don't think that's inspiring, and I don't think that's the way to. I don't know. I wouldn't like to live in that world where a couple of companies grow 80% of the protein and we eat this or that. I don't know. Like from your perspective, because it's interesting from a scientific perspective.
Oh, it's fascinating. Cultivated meats it's such a unique niche of the cell culture industry, right? Here, biotech. It's such a most of it's over on the west coast of the States, from what I've seen. There are ones in seafood, right? There's even a salmon company.
Yeah.
It's a wild types doing salmon, and they get the layering, they got the fat, and with the meat, it looks not bad, from a picture, from what I've seen. And scientifically, it's fascinating. Back when I used to work in the labs in biotech, I worked a little behind the scenes, right, prepping the media that we would grow cells on, human cells. And you're right, there's all sorts of fetal bovine serum is that's one of the most common, components to that. The method for getting that is not something that should be discussed.
Okay. No, explain a little bit. We can grow our
it's just
people, no problem.
No, it's think about it plainly. Like, in order to what are all the things you need to eat? If you take one of your own cells, plop it down on an apple or something, nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
Your cell, like a single cell or a culture of cells, is not equipped to just ingest food. And so a lot of work has to go into preparing it the same way your body would, right, through ingestion, bringing it through your bloodstream into these meats and the fibers of wherever these cells that are growing into these pieces of cultivated meat. Like, how do you make that happen? And it's a really difficult biological process. I think it's a really interesting case study, and I think it is important that we show that we can do this. And I think that some interesting science will come of it in the future. Quite honestly, I don't think that cultivated meats are ever going to square up with doing it the real way, simply because there are very sustainable ways to do it the real way. The only arguments that I really understand there are animal welfare, right? You don't have to worry about animal welfare if you are just growing a slab of meat, to a degree, right? I mean, there's arguments to be made there, but
like what? What argument?
That's a big. Well, those cultivated meats started somewhere, and that was a wild fish or wild, whatever meat. It comes from something. That's and when they get those cells.
It's funny when they explain that, because it's a cell from an animal which was not harmed, just a little pinch, right? So some they say something of the sorts. But yes, I mean, there's a little bit, but no, I understand. No, please, I just I was wanted.
Yeah, no, I think it's I think it's fascinating.
Yeah,
I love reading stuff about it, and I would love to try these cultivated meats at some point myself. I'm a huge proponent of using genetic technologies to make this stuff work. Because that is one of the facets we can approach if done right. There's, as we're well aware, there's very wrong ways to go about utilizing biotechnologies. But if we do it right, there's a space. That's what I think. Right.
So I have this idea, but I haven't really got feedback on it from somebody with credibility on the subject like you. I think that before we see, because one of the problems of lab-grown meat is that it costs, I don't know, like $1,000 an ounce, right? And if you're thinking about meat for your hamburger, it's a very big problem. But if you want an ear, right? If you got your ear chopped off because of whatever reason, you don't care how much it costs on a per kilogram basis, right? So, and if we have the technology to replicate a tissue, any tissue that we want, like before the food application, we should see the medical application. We should start see prosthetics, like aesthetic prosthetics, whatever. I mean, we need to see the first everything in terms of body parts before we see a steak. Don't you think? Do you think that makes sense?
No, absolutely. And that's where all this technology comes from, right? There are people walking around with printed organs. That's real. There's a TED Talk from a guy who has printed kidneys. And I think
interesting. I didn't know.
And this was not recent. This happened 10, 15 years ago. But as you're saying, it's wicked expensive. Now, regular homegrown kidneys from some person are not cheap either. So that makes sense that you could charge $250,000 for a couple ounces of meat there. When you want to make a burger patty out of it, you start to lose the financial
exactly
side to it.
The elasticity to price of kidneys is very low.
One of the big things about cultivated meats is they don't just, if you've ever watched like 3D printers work, it like, whoa, comes out of nowhere. It just like magically appears. That's not how cells work. You can't just, if you try to just grow it on nothing, that's a tumor.
Yeah. Okay.
You made cancer.
Okay.
So they grow them on a matrix. And a lot of times what that is kind of like they took an existing organ, maybe from a pig or a cow or whatever, and they wiped all the cells off. You can do specific there's processes you can do to get rid of all of those cells. And that gives a matrix, a structure for new cells to grow on, right? And they'll build out from there. Same thing applies to the cultivated meats industry. They have to work on, they have to build on these matrices. Now, some of them have found ways to do it, without going and getting a fish or whatever and killing it just to make a matrix. They have found ways to do it without that. But it is another layer of complexity there, right? Because you can't just have one of the issues with cells is like we don't really understand how to force that directionality yet. Those are really intricate signals. So they need a matrix. Which is great for organs, for transplants, people, right? If you can go grab a cow that was going to be slaughtered anyways, and clear it out, and put out some human cells in it, and put it in the guy who needed it, that's great, right? But again, like that's one of those things. Like the adaptation to food tech there, I think it needs to go a little further, right? That's, that's a pretty complex system.
The first, so in 2000, it was actually in 2020 when we started to do the Shrimpbox. One of our investors asked, "Are you worried about lab-grown meat?" And I never thought about it, so I said, like, I don't know. Now I am. Let me think about it. So basically, we put our scientific team to basically take a look at these companies and basically look for. At the time there were like, I don't know, 5 or 10, I don't know, but there was not like a big list. Now it's like 250. So we were able to basically do research on their research teams and to basically follow the literature, right? These people, because these companies were kind of new, so it was very easy to see, okay, what position was this CTO holding or whatever biotech director holding before was this. Let's look for their what have they published and let's read those articles, right? Their technology must be close to that somewhat, right? Maybe there was a breakthrough here and there, but it should be kind of close. This is the first time that I learned about the bovine fetal serum, and I was able to basically look at the supply of bovine fetal serum, which is nothing. It's like there's basically nothing, because I don't know how many people were doing experiments like you, and then now you have these companies that is one of their critical inputs, like for a whole industry. So just with that and this idea about we need to see this technology first in like biceps implants or whatever, right? In the medical industry, that was. I don't know. That was it for me. I was like, this is joke. And I never expected that there would be $14 billion investment into this.
Yeah, that's, I think a lot of people look at it the same way they look at biotech, right? In Boston here, we have some company will say, hey, we're studying this, extremely rare disease in, a very small population. We think we might have not a cure, but like it might help a little, maybe. Boom, billions of dollars out of nowhere. It's just the bubbles of biotech that kind of fall over into those food techs there. It's crazy, and I guess I understand it to a degree. It's really interesting work, scientifically speaking, and stuff like that it makes the news every time. If there's a new lab-grown meat, and you can put in the title like $50,000 hamburger, first of its kind, right? Or you get clicks. So, you end up with CNN and the BBC writing articles about your little 4-ounce piece of lab-grown meat.
Yeah.
So it's pretty from that stance.
And then we see it on TV, on these news outlets, and then we think that it is real. And it's not. I mean, there is not a single company with a commercial product. And I think that because nobody really, I don't even like the label food tech. I don't think that anybody wants their food to taste like tech. No, that's like my new kind of joke, whatever. But but you get the point. With like food, coming from, I think that anywhere, right? But like, for instance, here in Mexico, food is a big thing. We have plenty of different foods in every part of the state. So like thinking about the, how can you make, I don't know, chilaquiles with these kinds of stuff, right? Or it's, I don't know. It drives me a little bit crazy. And there is this there's even people that are getting with these recipes like for your whole day, the whole diets, that in the morning you should eat this and you should eat that, and specifically this in order to save the planet. It's like, please erase yourself. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on before was about your experience with the organic farm. Was it organic, biodynamic? Could you explain the difference? Are you aware of those kinds of difference?
So at the time I had not a clue. Right. I worked there because it was the closest one. Mm-hmm. And the understanding that I came to there was the trade-off we were making was a lot of our products had, worms, caterpillars, all sorts of stuff in them. They were deformed. All of our apples looked really weird. And we would even have bins at the farmers at the stand, right? Mm-hmm. We had all our pretty produce, and then around the corner we just had a giant bucket of stuff that was misfits, half off. If you want this carrot that goes, woo, take it. And so that was my understanding at the time of, the trade-off was, and because of that, all of the labor that goes into making, a carrot look pretty, that's why it costs twice as much.
Yeah.
For organic there. I've come to understand it a bit better, especially from a regulatory standpoint. Because, to label stuff as organic or inorganic or whatever you'd like, a lot of stuff plays into that, and it's not as intuitive as a lot of people would think, right? Organic doesn't mean it didn't have any chemical use, and, there are some chemicals used in the industry that should be used. It's people out there are drinking like raw milk. Stop, please, for your own sake, raw milk.
Yeah.
Pasteurization exists because cows have a lot of bacteria, especially that can harm you. It came about because it gets a lot of people sick. It can kill people. It's the very minor loss in some of the proteins and the amino acids that come with pasteurization. It's not worth dying for. So, I'm a huge there's limits to like how far organic should go. But no, I really liked that, the organic on the farm, right? Of we don't care what this produce looks like. Like sometimes we would have coyotes come and eat all of our melons. We would get really mad about it and put up really big fences. But at the end of the day, there was nothing we could do.
Yeah.
Apparently coyotes love melon, especially in the summer. I guess it's a good, I don't know.
A lot of water. Yeah, of course. Sure.
Yeah, I guess.
It's delicious to them. Yes.
Yeah. So I developed an appreciation there for, you're out in nature, just because you've plowed the fields and ripped all the trees out doesn't mean you aren't still in nature. So you kind of have to, in the end of the day, you can only fight so hard. You have to accept that you're going to lose some melons to the coyotes. It's going to happen.
Yeah, of course. And do you think that this can scale?
Yeah, that's the issue, right? That really is. It's, when I was coming out to visit you guys, right, in Indianapolis, coming down, you fly over, hundreds and hundreds of miles of cornfields because we need that in the States. We don't have...
And in Mexico, we buy a lot of corn from you.
Yeah, it's you can't do that without these massive monocrops. There isn't... Where we stand now, like, I don't know how you would do that organically. No, it's not feasible, right? There's a balance there, and I honestly, I don't know where it is, right? Because people got to eat,
Yeah.
And corn goes beyond just eating. We use it to power our cars. When it says 10% ethanol, where do you think that comes from? It's we've really put corn as like the staple of like America at this point. It's pretty interesting if you look into it.
Yeah. So, and this is the thing, right? Because we know that we need a new food system, and we know that the current food system is really good at scale, right? And
Yes.
and efficiency, and we need efficiency for many things, we are starting basically here a regenerative farm, that this is and that is based on the Shrimpbox waste, right? So we basically put the waste, you saw it, right, with the waste into a biodigester, and from that we get bile, which it's basically a fertilizer for the soil, and we also use other kinds of stuff for regenerative practices like composting. So it's that, and also how we basically plant the land, right? The different plots and the terraces. And I know you must know about this, but it's basically row crops. They lose a lot of water because of the way that they are basically like channels. So the water goes very fast,
Yeah.
right? So then when you're doing a regenerative ag, you can save something like 90% of the water just by using basically designing,
Really?
yes, designing the soil, designing in terraces, right? So the water is not lost through the soil, because if you have more organic matter in the soil, then basically it absorbs what's life, water. So it's basically recycling this water and creating, so not letting it drain. So we know that we can save a lot of water by using regenerative agriculture practices. But then you need to do specific to do many species, right? So many kinds of products. And if you do many kinds of products, then from a supply chain point of view, you can have different kinds of clients. Because if you're harvesting all year long, you basically plan your land and your farm according to specific harvests in different parts of the year, you will always have product. At least here, like in a place like Mexico, which we don't have strong winters. So then you can have non-stop harvesting, and then you can create commercial connections with retail stores and farmers markets, and then you have and restaurants, right? So then you cut a lot of the intermediation that goes between the farmer and the actual consumer, and they keep basically something like $3 out of $4. So from a farmer's perspective, yeah, the intermediation. So then from a farmer's perspective, you can basically multiply your income. You can lower your need for water, which is kind of a basic and scarce resource. The question is, how can this scale? Because right now we rely on grains, and doing something like this cannot really, I mean, you can have some grains, but not a lot, and cereals, but not a lot. I mean, you need really big land in order to do that. So I don't know how can that, and I think that this is the interesting part, which there are so many things that are very promising, and we don't know the answer if they will work at what scale, right? At what scale will we stop? And then, so like for me, I think that what we should do is just like push hard to basically grow these things, try to make them and design them scalable, and see where it stops. Maybe it will be something like at 5% of the market, maybe 10% of the market. I don't know, 20%. I don't know. I really don't. And I don't think that anybody knows. And the problem is that there's a lot of people that talk with a lot of confidence, saying basically that the future will be the same as the past, or kind of the same, but in a very I don't know, sad way of looking at humans, like we're just like an obstacle, right, to nature to develop. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking like, you build out these terraces, right? Because I know exactly what you're talking about there. I visited Sapa Valley and I walked around in them, and besides all the leeches I was getting, it was incredible. right? But it's so much work to maintain those. It really is, because you can't take a massive machine and run it over those mountains. It doesn't work. So I'm sitting here, I'm thinking like food tech should really move towards that, right? Because with the technology we have today, you could automate that harvest, right? With these staggered terraces, and God knows how you would do it, but it's not infeasible anymore that you could automate that, right?
And in Mexico, we don't need automation for that.
Retain the regenerative. Yeah.
Because we have, because we don't. So the problem is that you Americans, you earn a lot of money for your hour, but here it's like. But
I don't know who's making that money. It's not me.
So as compared on a purchase power parity, right? So like for us, like I don't know, it's like when you go to Bali and it's very cheap, no? Or I don't know if it's anymore, but to Thailand, it's because of the purchasing power parity. It's because of the currency value, right? So because our currencies are so much devalued, I mean, the price it's very cheap. So then somebody can have here in Mexico a very low wage for American or European standards and have a very good life. And I don't know if this is if this sounds very basic. But what I have found is that it's difficult to, if you live in a place like Mexico, to understand the labor market in the U.S. Like for me, it was very difficult when I started working in the United States and hiring people, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. Like because we have people doing exactly the same job in Mexico and doing exactly the same job in the United States, right? So like for instance, for our Shrimpbox, we like automation is the most important thing. It's basically our like more than 2/3 of our strategy to be able to at some point outcompete the imported commodity. It's automation, 100%.
Of course,
right? So but here in Mexico we have a different challenge, right? Because we still care about our farm here. And the thing here is not automation, it's basically productivity. So it's interesting because we know that at least with the same technology for shrimp, there is no like one size fits all, not even for the same company.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't, thought about it from that standpoint there, because, I think a lot about this stuff in the States, and most of the aquaculture that happens in the world, even most of the fish and shellfish I eat, it's not from here.
No. Yeah.
Us Americans, we're uniquely stunted in our aquaculture. We love to do absolutely nothing. We like to legislate against it.
Yeah.
With some few exceptions, right? But that's fascinating. Like in the end of the day, it's the same roadblock, but from a totally different standpoint.
Yes.
Which is interesting. Yeah. So you have to tackle two problems at once there, with different problems, different solutions, but the same outcome is what your goal is there.
Exactly.
I mean, last we spoke, your automation here in the States is getting really good, right? It was, it was up to or down to just like a couple hours a week on a farm was necessary for, actual labor. A
couple hours a week per box. Yes.
Yeah.
So no, and now we're using this app, and it's very interesting to basically to see how much time, because like if you ask me like from one point of view, I think it's creepy to be tracking how much time your employees are using on every task, right? Because this app is basically tracking how much time they are using it. But we're using it basically to pick the next target for automation, right? And our employees are basically, it's still kind of, even if it is for a commercial farm, it's still R&D, right? Because we're getting better and better and better. So, and these are people that are very cool with us tracking exactly how much time they're investing in each task, because they know that we want to make their life easier. So I don't know. It's interesting because like at that farm we are doing like, this is more like behavioral kind of research, right? That part. I mean, we're using software, we're using sensors, we're using a farm that is basically a shrimp farm, but really what we care about when we use that perspective is human behavior. and the feedback about, because we want to make their life easier. So it's very interesting to have, it's basically your user, it's basically your employee. Creates a very interesting dynamic. But on the other side, they are basically using some of their time, for instance, with Biomedit, which you met our friends from Biomedit that time, right? These guys are geniuses. And they are studying the biofloc. And I don't know if we told you this, but they told us that 80% of the genetical footprint that they see there, it's in no library, right? So it's not categorized. This is the first time that they see this. And so now we're starting to know a little bit more about these basically these organisms, right? We're learning their history, like from the first moment. So that's interesting. How common is that you're just discovering microorganisms?
Yeah. So I've done all sorts of like microorganism stuff. I've even done like the mass spec test that they're talking about. It's not a mass spec, but like a huge spectrum of bacteria that you look at, right? I did it on, it's called your retroauricular crest, the back of your ear.
Oh, wow.
And like in about there. And, you look at it, you swab it, and you see all of the different bacteria that are there and the concentrations, relatively speaking. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of streptococcus, the same one that gets you sick. There's a lot of tuberculosis here, just hanging out. It was crazy to learn, and like that's totally normal, right? Yeah. I'm not like some sort of patient zero. I thought I was for like 5 minutes, but it's the microorganisms that are just around us at all times. It's to a degree that you wouldn't because you can't see it. You never think about it, but it's so much more important and so much more present than any other visible beings, right? So it doesn't surprise me at all that 80% has never been sequenced of what you're pulling out of your waters. And I'm sure if you go over to the farm next door, you're going to have the same thing, even though it's this, you would think like, oh, we just sequence it here. Probably not. There's going to be different strains. It could just be different time of day. It's going to be different. Mm-hmm. All of this craziness is going to factor into that. But, it's all like, what's incredible about it is they know that, right? Yeah. They can look at it. They can sequence thousands of these organisms at once. That's new technology, especially to do it and have it not cost $1 billion and take 5 years. The greatest thing we got from sequencing the human genome, which was like one of the most expensive and longest biological projects ever, was that, that was a huge waste of time because it's way more complicated than they could ever hope. And by the time they'd finished, the technology had gotten so much better that they could do it again for 1/10 the cost and 1/10 the time. But you had to go through it that first time. You had to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have developed those technologies to keep moving forward. So what you guys are doing is you're doing the same thing. You're paving the way there. You might not know what it is, but you can trace that lineage back. Like typically they'll do like ancestral, but they'll build you out a phylogenetic tree, right? So it's like, well, we don't know specifically what this is, but it's very close to this one. Mm-hmm. And you can see that divergence evolutionarily and be like, okay, well, it's pretty much the same as that. And then you can look at it a bit more and pretty much you identify it by what you don't know, like what makes it different. These like small microorganisms, like what they do. You'll pull it out of the ecosystem and see what goes wrong. And this is probably what they're doing at Biomedit is they take this group and they'll kill off one bacteria and see what happens. Then they know what it does. Simple as that. You keep working through it, and eventually it'll get to the point where I'm sure they're going to be able to like augment that microbiome that's in your marine system. Yeah. So what we want to do is basically so because we are matching that with our data from water quality and also from our just like zoo technical performance, right? So the size of the shrimp, how fast they're growing, if they are surviving, if they are stressed. We have many markers of stress because one very interesting thing about shrimp is that they are literally transparent. Translucent at least, but also they are really transparent in how they feel, right? You can basically ask a shrimp, how do you feel today? And they will tell you through different kinds of signs of stains in the shell, of their antennulas being short, because they are always developing, probably like the ajolote, because they are molding all the time. So they are going through these changes, and while doing these changes, something can go wrong, and then you will see,
right? Maybe if they molt again, they will regrow their limbs or their shell or whatever, and you won't see it. So these like stress markers change from week to week. So we can match that with the microbial community. It's
cool.
Yes.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's So you're going to be able to nail down like the exact microbiome you want in these systems you have here. You gotta bring me back out there to see it when you got it up and full there.
Yeah. So maybe
that's going to be crazy.
I can invite you to one of our meetings. I mean, you should sign like an NDA or something. But yes, I think that you will have a lot of questions to these guys, and these are just amazing people. I think I really suggest you build a relationship with them because they are so smart. They're great. They have a project with I don't know what company in order to basically try to decrease the amount of methane that comes from cows burping, right? So through their microbial community. So because do you know about the rumen and the different stomachs of the cow and all that?
I know they have a bunch of them. Not much more than that.
So the way that our chief scientist explained this to me is so cows have, I think it's 4 stomachs, right? They have rumen. So the rumen, it's basically a microbial community, but each stomach is specializing in different kinds of processes, right? So this is why they can basically use cellulose. So, and in order to break that, they have different bacteria or different microorganisms that are feeding on the grass, and they are feeding on different parts of grass, and then the cow eats the grass, but they basically absorb the bacteria. So basically, the nutrients are basically these organisms that they are producing themselves. So basically, a cow is farming their own food and giving them something that they cannot use, but that their farm inside their body can do. And in a way, we do the same. There are many things that we cannot process, right? Our goat microbiome is doing that. So then the methane, it's basically it's the result of some of these processes that are happening on the inside one of the cows of the stomach. So the stomachs of the cow. So these guys at Biomed, they're basically looking for different microbial communities that can just decrease, or maybe it's just like a probiotic that is tilting the microbial community towards a steady state that is not as methane producing than the current way. So, like, if that happens, then most of the problems with cows in that regard go away, right? With technology that is basically understanding how nature works.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. You know, I know I've heard a lot of the news stories, right, about the impact of, cows and methane and everything that comes with that. I mean, we can never, the issue I see with cows, right, is we're knocking down the Amazon rainforest.
Of course.
To ranch these things. So I don't know how you solve that. Because at the end of the day, the cow needs somewhere to walk around on, unless you want to put it in a factory, which has... then we're back to square one, right? So,
yeah, of course.
But it's interesting to see that like they're tackling, because again, that falls under the guise of, you can't realistically just tell them all to stop, but what you can do is make their practices more efficient, more regenerative, healthier. So I like that approach there, like reducing the methane, because I'm sure that's healthier for the cows as well, and they'll, animal welfare will improve with that.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe they need. I don't know. I really don't know, and I don't want to. Yeah. I don't like to pretend that we know. Nobody knows, because this is just like new research. Of course, the Amazon thing and all these, like in Mexico, I calculated, but it's basically something like 30% of our territory has a cow. Like if you do like by hectare.
Really?
I mean, in terms of if you just sum the average, how many cows per hectare, and you sum the total numbers of cows that are in Mexico, you get to a very stupid number, like 30% of the territory, right? And it's mostly, I didn't
know you guys had so many cows.
I think it's mostly because many people have a cow like in their farm, right? So then the whole maybe the whole farm, it's considered as cow territory, where maybe the cow is only living in one small part or just moving, right? But my point is that there are just too many cows in Mexico, right? And we eat them in our tacos all the time. So no, of course, this is not we cannot just go about doing this, right? But just like understanding and mitigating the impact, some of the impact with these ways, I don't know, and mostly because microbial communities, I just think that they are so cool. So yeah, so we're approaching
it's a hidden world, and it influences everything. You know, that's. I used to be wicked into the microbiome as well. It's something like my mom's. She's involved with that. She does stuff in biotech, and that's a big part of it. It's a lot of biotechs are looking at the microbiome as the answers. You know, I used to study. One of the things I studied beyond stem cells was the biology of aging.
Oh.
I had a professor who was wicked into that, and it was very cool class, Professor Javier, and one of the things he helped to kind of bring to light was our microbiomes. He was studying killifish, which are these little tiny little fish. They're really good for biological studies because their lifespan is 6 months, give or take. So you can just, not to sound like apathetic, but they just burn through them, right? You can get like 10 generations in 5 years, and what they found is if you just live out your life, your microbiome in your gut becomes more virulent over time. It kind of falls out of whack, and that shortens your lifespan, at least in these killifish. So what they did is they did strategic antibiotic knockouts, like full spectrum antibiotics, knock it all out, and then they would do essentially a fecal transplant, but they would bring the microbiome from a much younger, healthier killifish back to the starting one, and it extended their lifespans.
Wow.
So the impact that these bacteria in our body have is not insignificant, and pound for pound, I think bacteria make up at least a couple pounds of your body. It's significant.
And 50% of our cells are not from our genetic profile. Did you know about that?
It's probably way higher than that. I'm sure it's a majority of your body is on a cellular basis is made up of something else.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I got this from. So there's this book. It's called "I Contain Multitudes." Have you read that one? I think it's
I haven't.
Stephen Young. Yeah, well, it has all these. So
I'll have to.
Yeah. His premise is amazing. He's basically said like we have, because of the way that we understand disease, right? Like so the pathogenic theory of disease, we just thought that these are our enemies, but it's like a teeny tiny proportion of microorganisms that we know are pathogen. I don't know, it was like 4% or 0.4%. Like it was not something, it's not really the majority. The majority either don't care about us, and the ones that care about us are really, so we have basically a mutualistic relationship with them. They are part of our microbiome, right? And we live in a kind of like harmony. So he basically goes about every aspect of your life that you can think about, and he basically asks how are microbes related to this, right? So it's really good book. You will enjoy it a lot. So I'm gonna make
a note of that.
Yes. So sorry, I almost need to go. I have a plane to catch, but I don't know. We should do this again. This was a lot of fun, and thank you very much for supporting me in this new project. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. No, we're over time here, but it's great to talk about this stuff.
Yes.
Especially good. There aren't many of us in like the aquaculture world, like the seafood world, who are just like so fascinated by like the biology of it. A lot of the guys I talk to, they're like old school seafood guys, and that's not really their thing. So whenever I run across somebody else who is just as passionate about it, I'd love to just dive into it. So yeah, let's stay in touch. Go grab your plane. Good luck with that. It's at least here it's 9 p.m. So sound like you're gonna have a fun flight there. But yeah, let's stay in touch. I'd love to, if you guys are gonna be at SINA again.
Yes, of course.
And we can do some more.
And next time we have a meeting with the microbiome guys, I'll invite you, and then maybe we can talk here about what we have learned together. All right?
Yeah. No,
Take
absolutely.
care, man.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.